So let the roll call show that those present tonight include Roland Eglin, Guy Thieland, Graham Ball, Harriet Applegate, Drew Herzig, Craig Kluge, and Linda Strievsky, along with our law department staff, Lee Brumrein, which we appreciate, and we have one guest here so far, Len Friedson. I want to mention to you all that I've got tentatively scheduled, I've got Mayor George from Lakewood coming to speak with us on March 20th. If we do get arrangements in place to have a meeting this Saturday, I'm going to circle back with her to see if perhaps she wants to, come then or participate remotely then. But I was having difficulty working with her staff to find a day when she was available. And I in discussing with her today, I only gave her dates that we were already scheduled to meet because I didn't want to presume that we could do extra meetings without polling everybody else. And it's been a little bit difficult to get some of these meetings scheduled. So the other news I have is that we do have confirmation that our meeting on February 12th will be recorded. And I spoke to Tony Kuda today about the supplies we need for the meeting, and he told me to send Addie an email about that and ask Addie to get all that stuff pulled together. And the article in the Heights Observer was published. I saw it.
It was good to see.
Congratulations.
I think it takes much to get published there, but thank you. I appreciate that.
So far, there are
It's a pulse.
there are 12 people who have registered so far.
Oh, good.
But I sent an email out today to 45 people.
But people do not have to register.
They do not.
Probably won't.
They do not, but
Linda gave an excellent public comment yesterday, noting that people do not have to register.
I did. But I also had copies of the flyer to give to people at the meeting last night. So, and there were a good number of people at the meeting last night. So maybe some of them will be interested.
I saw people in the committee of the whole brandishing their flyer.
Yeah, so I encourage you all, if you have lists of your friends that you want to share it with, please go ahead and do that. Just to be sure that the public is aware of what's going on. Hi, Jean.
Hi.
How are you? Oh, you're fine.
Hi. Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So does anyone have anything else, before we start doing introductions, anything else anybody wants to say for the good of the order here?
I just want to say that Harriet and I received, with Lee's help, received 150 copies of that flyer.
Mm-hmm.
We distributed about 100 and I'd say about 120 of them. And of those, I would just say 80% of them found their way to being seen by the public. So it's about 100 flyers that are out there somewhere, people seeing it, et cetera.
I appreciate you doing that, you and
I
Harriet.
will note parenthetically that I went to a couple places the next day and the flyers weren't there anymore. That one was the Fairmount.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's why.
they took them down, and then another outfit, BOGO next to Bremen, would put them up would let them sit on the counter for one day.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So don't go there. Just kidding.
So we will introduce, everybody will introduce themselves just so everybody knows everybody.
I'm Guy Thelian, and I live on Delwood Bella Library.
I'm Roland Anglin. I live on Scarborough.
Should I introduce?
Sure.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Jean Gordon. I live on Scarborough.
No, there's Scarborough.
Wait, no.
Right next to each
Right next to each other.
No way.
Oh, man.
I'm Len Friedson. I live on Berkshire Road.
Okay, I'm Drew Herzig. It's funny we identify Borough roads. I'm on Bradford for what that's worth,
Harriet Applegate, Crest Road.
Greg Kluge over on Stillman.
Graham Ball, Bradford.
And Linda Strievsky, I'm in Delamere, and we have Lee Crumrine here, who's from the law department.
Assistant Law Director.
Yes.
What road do you live on?
What road do you live
In University Heights.
Shoal in University.
So thanks very much for coming. We appreciate you taking the time. We invited you as representatives of the Committee for an Elected Mayor because we were interested in your perspectives based on what you did in planning for the ballot issue and drafting the ballot issue. And, obviously we saw what went into the ballot issue, what was eventually put into the charter. But we were curious, as among other things, we were curious about whether there were other changes considered, particularly regarding the balance of powers that you didn't include in your final draft because it was beyond the scope of a single issue or for whatever reason. But we just are curious as to whether you thought about those issues.
Do you want me to take this?
Yeah, well, actually, let me thank you for first for inviting us. I did play a visitation role during the last CRC event, and it's a lot of work, and it's a drudge, and I thank you for doing this. It's not a fun job, but it sounds like you're making good progress, and good for you. As you rightly stated, we had limitations on what we could do in the charter amendment, and these are well known, single subject rules and blah 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 blah. To be fair, there were lots of things that we considered that we elected not to do, so as to focus on the issue at hand. So if you find, and I'm sure that you do find, gaps in things that could have smoothed the way, I applaud you for looking at them and trying to make any corrections that you can. You have the Charter Review Commission and the City Council have much more authority on what they can include in any charter amendments beyond the citizens' initiative. So I applaud you for doing that. Go ahead.
So, rolling back, when we were looking at the charter and deciding to move forward with a ballot initiative to change the form of government from city manager to mayor, we did a lot of background research. We knew that at that time, council was hostile to the idea. The majority of council was antagonistic towards the idea. And because of that, we consulted, I wish I could remember, I could look it up, don't know off the top of my head,
We had attorneys.
attorneys that we discussed, does single subject apply? There was significant dicta that it may apply in this area, that if we were to include changes within the council provisions, that it would be outside of mayoral. There's probably an argument that we could have done that on the same amendment and not have to collect two sets of petitions. But because of the antagonism that existed with the council, we anticipated that they would take any opportunity to attack and delay our amendment so that it wouldn't make it to ballot. And we know that was the case because they did try that
And
in other ways.
And what that
So-
means is bring legal action against us. That was what we lived with the whole time. And that was an ongoing threat. Never turned out to be the case.
Right, but I mean, we skirted close multiple times. So because of that, we were very conservative in what we did with the amendment. Meaning, for a good portion of what we did, we took the word city manager
Yeah, we noticed.
and changed it to mayor,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
So I often get a kick out of people saying that this is a whole new form of government. And I'm like, it really isn't that much of a new form of government. It's just different as to who gets to get rid of the executive now. Because we did not make significant changes to the charter. We changed the word city manager to mayor. We added provisions about recall and vacancy, right? We looked at 7, I believe, other cities. And I did review them last week. And I believe those 7 cities included University Heights, Bay Village, Rocky River, Lakewood, Parma, South Euclid, and Shaker.
Okay.
Those were the 7 charters we reviewed. The reasons why we reviewed those and why we selected them is because either they were neighboring cities, so we wanted it to be something that was familiar in the area, or that they were cities that were similarly sized,
Okay.
and I believe without wards. was something we also looked at.
Bay Village is smaller though, quite a bit smaller.
I don't know why we pulled Bay Village, but we did.
It's sort of an outlier.
It was an outlier.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know why it was there. But I believe those were the 7 we looked at. And there were reasons why we were looking at them. I can't think why we looked at Bay. Maybe it's because they were close to Lakewood. We were watching those around that city. Kind of that it was similar to having like South Euclid and University Heights. So that gives you a background on what we did. We looked at different ways within areas that we could touch, like how other cities dealt with their public safety department, how they elected or, allowed the mayor to appoint or not appoint directors. We had lots of discussions. Around whether we should change those provisions. But I think the overall modus operandi was to be as conservative in change as possible, so that we weren't making significant changes to the way the administration runs City Hall, right? That it was kind of a smoothing in of this, and we figured some form of you all would come along and do the rest of it after a period of time to figure out what needed to do.
We needed to do the heavy lifting.
We just need to get the form of government changed. We figured you guys would smooth out the rough edges.
And Linda, to your question about did we give consideration to lines of authority or traffic lanes, balance of powers, to be honest, not a lot. It certainly, looking back on it, we could have done that, but in fact, we didn't. We needed to get a structure in place, and neither Jean nor I really ever did this before. We were newbies, and it was.
We did have a good firm that was assisting, and I'm certainly not a newbie to drafting legislation or legal language or the like, or interpreting or reading it. Had I drafted a ballot initiative amendment to a charter before? No. But once again, in terms of like structures of power, I don't know. I guess I get very confused about this in this conversation that has been happening in this area, because from my perspective, except for, and we are in complete agreement about this, but it wasn't an area that I felt like we would have touched, could have touched, or thought about touching in terms of like the right to get information from the administration. I mean, let's be quite frank about this.
You're saying you did look at that, or you didn't?
No,
we didn't.
I'm saying I don't understand some of the. I guess what I'm saying is right now I know there's a lot of conversation around that, and I do think maybe some guardrails need to put up that we did not do, and nor would we have done. But because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm thinking about the charter, that section is under the council provision.
The right of inquiry.
The right of inquiry is.
There is no right. That term does not happen in the charter.
What is the term that's used?
Except for purposes of inquiry.
Purposes of inquiry.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And we've got this myth
Hold on,
now.
hold on.
We've got this myth that there's a right of inquiry in the charter.
Well,
Right.
what I'm saying is, I believe that was whatever words there were, whether it's
It didn't
purpose of
appear to be
inquiry or
a
the right of
problem
inquiry.
in the past.
I guess what I'm saying
in the
is-
city council article.
What I'm saying is in the council article, and we did not look at anything in the council article unless it referenced city manager, and then we changed the word to mayor, right? But I guess one of the things that I keep struggling with, while I do think we need to put guardrails around how council is provided information, so that council can do its job, which is legislation, right? I would think about, like, if I wanted to bring in a sidewalk program and I can't get the information on what percentage of sidewalks are replaced in a year, how can I investigate legislation and the cost of that and everything else if I'm not getting information? So I do think we need to do something about that, but let's be clear, this language has always existed in our charter. It has been a reinterpretation of what that language means. And I keep thinking back, any city manager could have tightly controlled directors, could have put the same limitations on their staff that we hear Mayor Sarin is currently doing, where it does seem to be the case that he is doing. A city manager who did that may have been at risk of having their employment contract not renewed, right? Because remember, they were on employment contracts. I don't think it would have been a fireable offense under the language of the employment contracts, but it would certainly prevent them from renewing, which means if people are unhappy with this, they cannot renew Mayor Sarin's.
Oh, yeah, that's.
Right? Yeah, like, so, I mean, I guess one of the things, I mean, I when we talk about these like balances of power and did we give thought to that? I would say that no, because the power dynamic we were thinking about was the voters taking action.
Yeah. Well, and
Right.
you know, certainly, I think we all understand, given the limited education that we've had as part of this commission about what ballot issues can and can't do and what charters are supposed to do and what they shouldn't do, that you didn't have free range on what you could and couldn't do, so we're not at all critical of.
Well, no, I understand that. I'm just saying that's where we were coming from, that we were being very, very conservative in the way we addressed it. We weren't trying to upset apple carts heavily.
Yeah, and we also looked at the charters from Lakewood, South Euclid, Shaker, and University Heights at the beginning of our work and kind of compared them on a bunch of different things, and the model charter, to compare them on a bunch of.
I mean, there were lots of things I would have loved to have updated, changed, whatever, but it certainly wasn't within our purview doing at that time.
Specifically, did you talk much about, or did the committee have any unified desire to bring in a hybrid system of districts in at large for electing council?
Yeah.
Can you talk about your discussions around that?
Yeah, that was real interesting. So early on in our organization, if you will, before we really had some substance to go with, we talked about the issue of wards. There, at the time, there seemed to be a big appetite for wards, more so than mayor, by the way, at that time. This was late 2018 and early 2019. There was quite an appetite for wards. And we did consider that. And then we considered, well, maybe we would do both. And then that was more to our immaturity than anything, because in the end, we decided we can't do too much or we will fail. And so we ended up electing to go with an elected mayor as having the most impact in the shortest period of time, probably. And it was a judgment call. I mean, I still think it was the right one, but people could argue that we maybe should have gone another way. But regardless, we did think about it. We talked about it quite a bit. We did talk about hybrid things, and there's lots of variation on how to do wards. There's issues about explaining it to the public, what it means to them. There are issues of drawing ward lines, which is a big deal. And we felt very much a time constraint on how much could we get done in what period of time.
Right, so when we started talking, the conversation was wards, mayor only, ward only, mayor ward. And I feel like I was always the buzzkill that was like, if we're going to do wards, it would have to be 2 ballot initiatives. It would have to be 2 sets of signatures. It would have to be you could do a combined campaign. And I said, but I'm not touching an amendment for wards unless, and drawing what a ward would look like, because you would most likely have to say how many words, ward boundaries, like all that stuff. I'm not touching that without a civil rights attorney on us. And I don't know that we can fundraise enough for the campaign, for 2 ballot initiatives, civil rights attorney, to make sure we aren't, because that could be attacked pretty quickly and easily, depending upon how you draw wards, count wards, consider wards, all that type of thing.
And I think it's also worth noting that this issue, regardless of the fact that there was an appetite for wards, it was just broad. It wasn't about what kind of wards, what do you have in mind? How many wards do you want to have? And there are advantages to having more wards versus less wards, but there are downsides as well. And we felt we would
Do you
need
have at large?
public input about where are people coming from when you get to details. So at the time, it was decided, let's not go there. And I would even go so far as to say to this review commission, I don't think we're ready to go there even today. I think we have a lot on our plate to deal with this new form of government that is still in embryonic stages. And a ward is it's a big change. It's really big. I think we need to get comfortable with where we're at on mayors right now, in my opinion. But I like the idea. I do like the idea of wards. I do. I think it's really very responsive, more so than at large. It's responsive. And I like the hybrid model. We talked about the hybrid model. I think there's a lot to be said for the hybrid
Couple at
model.
large, a couple
Sure.
wards.
There's good benefits to that. I just don't think now's the right time.
Does anybody else have questions about either one of those 2 buckets of things?
But I do have a couple of questions. One is, when you put all this effort into getting this on the ballot kind of thing, you were hoping to make it more democratic, is what I heard you say, that an elected mayor rather than a hired city manager felt to you that it was more of a democratic process. Was that the intention?
Well, certainly that was a component, but I think the term we used most often was responsive and accountable. And that those 2 pieces as applicable here was a way of saying what we've been doing for 100 years worked okay for a while, but it wasn't working in the last 15 or 20, or it wasn't working as well as we.
42, if I remember correctly.
As
32.
we had hoped. It's aspirational. It wasn't what we had hoped, and we're hoping for more by having an elected mayor who could do bold things and take on things. And by the way, attached to this was this notion of a city administrator whose primary goal, the primary objective was to give the mayor freedom to not deal with the details of running the city. So he or she could work on the big issues and not worry about day-to-day stuff.
So I think what we really, in our conversations, what we really saw was that a city manager is really difficult to terminate when you have at-large, non-ward, not head-to-head elections of a part-time council. Meaning, in what way does the citizenry put pressure on you as city council members to not get elected if you don't get rid of the city manager? There's almost no way you can say, I'm gonna make sure you don't get elected unless you do this, because of the way the terms happen, the way, right? So there's never an ability of pressure from residents or citizenry, voters, to find a way to terminate a city manager. As we see, we had Mr. Downey for lots and lots of years, 24 years, I think Mr. Downey was city manager. And I think probably 22 of those, if someone said who's running City Hall, they would have all said Ed Kelly. Right? For however many years that Mr. Kelly was president of council, Mayor Ed Kelly. And then we had Tanisha for 12?
That long?
No.
I don't think it was quite that long.
A lot shorter than that.
Yeah, shorter
I
than
don't know that it was
It seemed,
shorter.
it seemed like 12 years though.
No, I don't know. I think it was shockingly longer than you all thought. Or there might have been someone in the interim. I don't remember. But that there was almost 34 years with only 2 city managers. And during that time period, lots of things happened that I would say the citizens were unaware of. I would say that what we are seeing, for better or for worse, maybe it's a little uncomfortable, is that it does appear, I would say in the past 2 years, that people know more, hear more, are more connected to what's going on. And I don't know if that's because of the tension between council and the mayor, or if that's because of YouTube, Nextdoor, Chatter, or the like. I'm not sure which one is driving that.
Yeah, it could be interesting because I think that probably people got a lot more comfortable attending meetings remotely.
Mhm.
I don't even remember if they were broadcast before COVID.
Council meetings were not before COVID, actually, streamed. They were not.
And so that makes a big difference because people can just
It
watch
does.
at home.
It does, and I'm lazy, I admit it. I sometimes would prefer to just watch on the tube, rather than come in.
Yeah.
But I kind of miss it at the same time, I do.
I'm assuming that before the change, when there was a city manager, there wasn't so much antagonism, mutual animosity on the council kind of thing. I'm new here, so I really don't know how things operate.
No, there was some pretty big fights.
Yeah, there was the Cheryl Stevens fight.
Yeah.
There was a CEM
Dragging
fight.
past history, but
Yeah, they had their, but the point
There was
is,
the water.
There was the water,
the
yeah.
water
But the
issue.
citizenry was pretty up in arms against Denisha. I think that helped.
The water, it was a big part of that, by the way,
Yeah.
which she ended up caving on. Actually, she said, yeah, you're right, the numbers are good. But they had to kind of really push hard for
And
that.
then severance was also a big,
Right, but I would say all that happened after Mr. Downey and the revelation of the EPA consent decree.
Yeah, that was a big one too, yeah.
Right.
When, with all this discussion of the city manager and whatever, when cities are doing well, they're healthy, the form of government takes a kind of oh, by the way, it's not this thing that jumps out at you, but we've had declining prospects for a couple of decades, and there didn't seem to be any indication that that was going to change. So in truth, a lot of this, the appetite for an elected mayor was change of some form, and this is the form that it took, but it's really a statement about we can't do things the way we've been doing them for the last 20 years because it isn't working. That's really what it boils down to. If the city was healthy, Tanisha Briley would be here today. I'm firmly convinced of that.
I'm not, but.
every big error. The water was a big error. The kicking the can down the road even further with the sewer system was an error and severance was an error. Those are major.
They are, but that's
I
a
would
sign of
say-
And the
unhealth.
citizenry was riled up about them.
Yeah, they
I would
were.
say
Yeah.
council was getting on the severance misstep, but.
Well, she was the one who said, we're not gonna, I thought it was really Tanisha.
Once again, this is one of my big issues.
Severance.
This has been my consistent issue, and I really wish, and I think one of the things that council has failed to do in the past and needs to figure out how to do now is that we do not legislate. When Tanisha said we don't wanna buy this, council could have gone around Tanisha and legislated that we will buy this, right? When, regardless of who you wanna listen to on the whole lifeguards and insurance at the pool, I have consistently said, and I said throughout my campaign, like, hey, you can legislate that the city's gonna pay for that, right? Now they're doing it, right? So I think one of the problems I see, and I don't know that the charter is necessarily the place to do this, I think part of this is a growing, is that we haven't had active legislators. I mean, one of the problems is now that we have a limitation on information for some of the council members. I don't know if it's broad-based, if it's all the council members, but we do know some council members are having problems with information. And, you know, there are ways to legislate as a council. When we talk about balance of power, I don't know that, I mean, I think there are some guardrails that the charter could have in it, right? I know Lakewood, but they do it through ordinance, requires reports and stuff. I don't know if it's better to do it through the, you know, ordinances or the charter in terms of like you have to provide reports quarterly or whatever they have in their ordinances. But we do have a problem with not having, we haven't had a significantly active legislating council.
And we don't have a tradition of it either.
Right.
So it's a change that is not a natural thing. People have to evolve in this case, and maybe there's some good signs. We'll kind of wait and see. I think there's some signs that there's an evolution happening, but it's going to take some time.
I think part of it may be almost a training issue. We'll call it an opportunity for training, because when you have a council that is comprised of part-time legislators who don't have formal training on how one goes about developing legislation, and you may occasionally have somebody on city council like Councilor Boyd who has some experience as a legislator, but typically people don't have that.
Sure.
And it's a skill like everything else. So I think that I did hear at the committee of the whole meeting last night discussion about some proposals to put in place some procedures that would make it clearer what the steps are if you wanted to propose legislation and how you go about getting from an idea at step one to legislation actually being considered over here. And a multi-step process, which makes total sense to me. It has to be a multi-step process almost. But to your point, Jean, part of that is almost always going to involve the need to get some information.
Right.
Because if you're tackling a problem, you need to know, how have we dealt with it in the past? Is there something in the works to try to deal with it now? What kind of budgetary constraints are there? What are the limits of our authority? You know, lots of issues that you would have to consider before you put pen to paper to write legislation.
Right.
But there seems to be an opportunity for education that could help facilitate development of helpful legislation.
Absolutely. I have heard that. I think that's something that would be valuable. Once again, nothing we were going to write into the charter, right? But I do think that there does need to be some growth in that area. And I don't mean necessarily with these current council people, but just in the way our council has functioned over time, right? And is it Lakewood that provides a training? I think
They require some training.
yeah, but you know, I do want to note that they are also a part-time council. Same with, I believe, Parma, and people with full-time jobs.
Yeah.
A lot more lawyers on Lakewood's council. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
It's like lawyers.
they do seem to get.
I like lawyers.
I like them too.
Don't say we.
I tried to advocate that there would be some value in adding a few more lawyers.
We ought not to go here.
We're not gonna put that in the charter, but
But I guess what I'm saying is that while all of this is true about the training, you know, there are councils that I think have a history and somehow are getting that done in an efficient manner. But I don't know that their charter does anything specific to make that happen. Right? So
we have discussed the notion of including in the charter some requirement for training. both for new council people, sort of orientation and training on the basics, but also ongoing.
Yeah.
And it just feels to me pretty obvious that if your job is to legislate, you need to learn how to legislate.
Yes.
And it's not a skill that you necessarily expect somebody to come to city council with.
Correct.
In your experience, Drew, how was that handled on the city councils you were on?
Well, we had a city solicitor who's attended every meeting kind of thing, and when we wanted to do something, they created the language around it. We weren't out, workshopping on how do we write, an ordinance or that sort of thing. We had a legal department, it was just one person, but it wasn't that big a city, so we were able to manage it kind of thing.
How big was the city?
Only 10,000. But again, we didn't have to go home and say, well, I'm gonna try and write a law, and I have no idea, I'm gonna go on Google.
I would say that's not all that different here because, but I think what you're saying is that it's not about the writing of the legislation, it's that what does legislation accomplish? We can have help from the law department on crafting it. Once we know what we want to accomplish, and there needs to be an understanding that the city council can initiate their own legislation. They're not just a rubber stamp for the mayor. They can do things. Hopefully
And they can do things with the assistance of the legal department.
and they can, even though the law department reports to the mayor, at least the current law director is pretty open to providing assistance to the council. It's not, by the way, in the charter, I will
I know,
add.
we noticed that.
And but I think this law director has been pretty reasonable from my observations, more so than the prior one, I might add.
I think even on that score, there's a difference between and among city council members. I've had council members tell me in private conversation that they don't think that's the case.
Well, that could be, and I have not had those conversations. I'm just saying what I have observed. So, the fact that the charter is silent about that is maybe something for you to entertain, although it's dicey. Do you remember any other cities that we looked at that had some language about the law department and its relationship with council? I don't remember that myself.
Well, I do remember, okay, so here was one thing I think we had conversations around. I looked at this, some of my old notes recently. That committees and directors were kind of fell under, well, they were hired and reported to the mayor, but kind of fell under council. And if I remember correctly, I think Parma and Lakewood might have done it that way. I didn't go back to look at charters. But that allowed a real clear indication that while they are part of the executive branch, that there's some responsibility to respond and support council.
Council appoints them?
No, it's more organizationally. It's where the discussion of departments and the like fall in those charters. And I can go back and pull some language.
Well, I know that in some of the charters that we looked at, the mayor has the authority to determine the organization of the departments and what falls under each department. In other charters, the city council does that.
Right.
And in some cases, in our charter, directors are appointed by the mayor subject to approval of council.
Correct.
But others are not subject to approval of council.
Correct.
And some commissions are appointed by the mayor, sometimes with the approval of council. Others are appointed by city council.
Right.
So there's different approaches on different issues.
I feel like that's been a hodgepodge of 100
Yeah.
years.
And again, it's difficult because when you've got these they're not interlocking, but they're intertwined organizational structures. It's like who's calling the shots. For instance, this may be slightly off topic, but the council passed an ordinance where they now have the authority to hire their own secretary. And that language also gave them the authority to hire anybody else they want. Now that to me is like if the mayor is the chief executive of the administrative side, do we now have a separate human resources department? I mean, who's paying the bills here?
That's right.
And that again.
So in a large city, there's enough wiggle room for the legislative and administrative departments to have their own staffs,
Right.
right? And that's common. We don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
We don't. So there's gonna be some kind of hybrid affair. And if the charter, I don't know how well the charter can get its arms around that. I don't know.
I would say sometimes I often have to remind people we're not a city, we're a suburb, right? In terms of like the way you think of things, right? So we'll say, well, Cleveland does it this way. I'm like,
Yeah,
Cleveland's
fine. It's not
a major major
Yeah.
metropolitan city.
Yeah.
We hope. Fingers crossed. It means a major metropolitan city. But I always think we have to look more at like what do large suburban, and when I say large, like 25,000 above. So I also have spent some time looking at like some central Ohio cities, right? So like how their councils work, whether they're city manager. I will say the mayoral form, the elected mayoral form, strong mayor form of government is much more common up here than down in the
You
central
talking about
Ohio
northern
area.
Ohio?
Yeah,
Okay.
northeast Ohio.
Northeast Ohio.
Balkanism, we have a lot of balkanized, and there's historical reasons for all of that and how it's spread and why things changed and all of that. And I would say that was another reason, just hearkening back, of why we decided on the mayoral change as opposed to the wards, is that we were one of the few cities in Northeast Ohio without an elected mayor, suburban, which I think made us feel as if, if our manager is attending the mayoral form of government, there's a little bit of he's not really the mayor,
Yeah.
even though they have full control of the executive. But since the understanding in this area is the elected mayor, it, kind of gave a different flavor.
So the council could, if they were so inclined, contract with their own legal counsel. They have the authority to do that.
Mhm.
I don't know that anybody's suggesting that they do that necessarily, but there's nothing keeping them from doing that.
Right.
And so when it comes time to, if you think it's appropriate to include something in the charter about this, you could just keep that in mind.
Can I ask, so you say there's nothing keeping them from doing that, but what about budget? Because my sense of what's happening here is that the mayor controls the budget and the council has not had as
Oh, but
much.
the council approves the budget.
Oh, they
Right,
have-
I mean,
Well, I understand,
I
but
keep
once, now we have a budget, so what?
This is about the maturing of a weak council. The council has not exerted its own inherent authority, and they can bring pressure to bear if there's something that they believe strongly in.
Okay,
We hope that it doesn't really get that way,
yeah, all right.
and we would expect a mayor to play nice with the council and the council to play nice with the mayor, notwithstanding what recent history.
I mean, I have, I don't think, I have all sorts of like, who's the client, if they get another lawyer,
Yeah,
and like,
yeah.
I don't think it
It's
makes sense. I think it's while we have branches of government, they don't function like our federal branches of government, right?
Mhm.
Not really.
So, having their own law staff I don't know, seems odd and too expansive to me. But I keep thinking, yes, the mayor presents the budget. That budget needs to be voted on.
No, I
You want more money for council? Don't vote the budget till you get more money for council, right? I feel like there is a lack of, there hasn't been a maturing of understanding politics to a certain extent.
So I do understand the explanation is that when council has that authority, could do those things, but by no means criticizing the individual members of the council, there isn't the maturity in that group at this point in time to have moved in that direction yet. So it's something which they
Yeah,
can,
well, and I think part of it is
Just a
bandwidth.
function of
If
maturity.
there's a bandwidth
There's
thing.
other things going on.
Well, I think when all the power rests in hiring and firing the city manager, you didn't necessarily have to figure out those other aspects. And when I say maturity, I don't mean this council specifically. I'm saying this is a change in the way City Hall interacts with city council, right? Because they are no longer the authority of the executive of City Hall.
To some of the other counselors we've spoken with say it's premature to go in and do major operation on the charter because everyone is still evolving in this new form of government,
I think there's
including the mayor. We keep assuming that the mayor was always there kind of thing, but the mayor started this, at the same time as the council started kind of thing. So everybody's evolving. So some of the people are saying, be cautious. And also our facilitator said, charter is long-term.
Right.
You don't want to micromanage in the charter. You want to make it long-term. So again, what you're hearing about, whether we're calling it evolving, maturing, whatever kind of thing is, it's still kind of early in adjusting to this new form of government.
I would endorse those words 100%. It's not like be fearful, it's about be cautious about what you're doing, and it has long-term. We don't want to be diddling with it every year.
Right.
We don't want to do that.
Right, but I think there's also, as I understand it, as I understand our mission for this commission, part of the mission was to evaluate and make recommendations as to whether, now that the elected mayor provisions were put into the charter, to, in a narrow way, put in place an elected mayor, and are there any other things that need to be adjusted to kind of make that whole package work? Not to make super dramatic changes, but are there things that should be done just for good housekeeping so that it works smoothly?
I think there are some language smoothings that we need to have in between the provisions, from the council provisions to city man, or to the mayoral provisions. I do think, that concept of where do the departments lie, right? I did watch Councilor Davida Russell's interview, and she was noting that, some organizations not only have consent to hire, but maybe consent to fire. And I thought to myself, that's an interesting concept. I don't remember other charters whether they had that provision. You have to have the mayor, the council's consent to appoint, but do you also need consent to fire? But I thought to myself, we would have never touched that, because literally in that section we did this: city manager, mayor, and left the rest of it alone, right? So, because once again, I don't know, how far is that past our purview? And how much does that start getting into council provisions instead of mayor provisions and all that type of stuff? So, it was an interesting thing that she said, and I was like, okay, interesting. Would this be something that might make sense now? I don't know. That's for all of you to figure out and to present. But, I thought to myself, yeah, we would have never touched that,
No.
So there are areas we just did not touch that I do think maybe I'm glad you guys are looking, but I think both of us are like, big changes right now. Yeah. And micromanaging it a little bit too much,
Yeah, well, I think we've been pretty clear in our discussions among ourselves about understanding that charters are not for the weeds. Charters are big picture.
Right.
Not to get into weeds and not to get into pages and pages of detail, more conceptual and kind of big picture.
Part of the model that we talked a lot about is not hog tying the mayor. We don't want to do that. But the suggestion that's been going on is, do we need to have some guidelines for the mayor? And that's actually a subtle nuance. We don't want, if we hog tie the mayor, we will not get bold behavior. We will not be anxious to make the big changes that are necessary. So there's a balance here between giving the mayor freedom to do mayor type things.
Right.
But there probably is a need for some guidelines. And just so you know, Gene and I are both in agreement about this with regard to inquiry, right, David? I'm shocked that it was even a subject. I'm shocked. And should there be something in the charter for that? Generally, yes, but the truth is, I could also say with a strong council, it wouldn't be an issue. They wouldn't have caved. They wouldn't have caved to the mayor, you know? The thing that the mayor and the previous president of council worked out that the council totally rejected was like two people getting together and thinking this is how it should be, and it was just wrong. I don't know if I'm being a little vague here. Do you know what I'm referring to? Yeah, it was kind of like, you know,
The memorandum of understanding.
memorandum of understanding. Yeah, and it was kind of like, what? I mean, this is terrible. So Jean and I are very adamant about the information flow should be vigorous and ongoing at all times. And it doesn't necessarily mean that when council asks for something that they get it. It means that the administration should be forthcoming in bringing this information to council. We're not running a secret here. We're holding the mayor accountable, and the only way we can hold the mayor accountable is if we, the people, know what's going on, and we do that through council. Sorry about that, I got a little carried away. I apologize to everybody.
But I think there's more going on here than an immaturity or a failure to ripen on city council. You have, right now, until just recently, you had a majority of council that was supportive of the mayor and whatever he wanted to do, whenever he wanted to do it.
That's true.
So that's not, council's failure to legislate isn't council's fault. It's the fault of a system whereby a majority supported the mayor and.
It's true.
So I mean, I think
True.
that's.
But so,
That's what
but you
happened when
can't,
an election happened.
that's right, that's where
This is
elections
where,
come in.
this is where I say it is a maturity issue. Because an election happened where that didn't bear out well for the mayor. And now you have a different coalition that is going to likely vote different. So I do think it is a matter, that's just politics.
Right, but I'm just, I mean, I
And we can't use the charter
But you're
to
right, Harry,
prevent politics.
I don't know that the charter can solve that particular
No.
issue, although I'm open to ideas. If you think there was some.
Well, I'm not saying that the charter can involve it, but I did want to comment that, you made some reference to, we will have to be able to expect that the mayor will play nice with the council and the council will play nice with the mayor. I would submit that we are in the middle of quite a significant evolution in politics. If you look at the US Congress, if you look at the State House in Columbus, I just heard an NPR story yesterday in Oregon, where the Democrats are in a majority, the Republicans walk out of the state legislature so that they cannot pass any legislation whatsoever.
Got it.
The US Congress passed 11 pieces of, or it was the State House. The State House, I guess.
Yeah.
11 pieces. We are in the midst of a significant change
You're
in
right.
politics.
Yeah, it's true.
And so it is, I think, relevant to consider that maybe, just like we can't do things like we've been doing from the last 100 years, maybe, and I'm not pushing this, I'm just opening it up for our discussion, maybe charters need to change too, and not just be this skeletal framework, or maybe they don't. But I think we are in the midst of a very significant political change in our country in which politics as we know it is not functional.
Right, but
It is not functioning and it's not functional. So I just think these deliberations are against this backdrop where we're experiencing a breakdown.
Yeah.
Breakdown of democracy, breakdown of our institutions, breakdown.
I would love to have a group meeting where these issues are talked about. Not sure that
Not
this,
here.
not this.
I'm not sure, but
I love the subject is interesting.
this is the soup
I
in
guess-
which we are swimming.
Right, I guess what I would say is, to a certain extent, at a suburban city level, we avoid some of that backdrop because our function, and you see much less of this happening in cities and suburbs, that backdrop, because our function is the delivery of municipal services, right? And the question is, how do we budget for that? How do we advance that? And how do we do that? Now, once again, I think we both go back to there is a dearth of transparency and data and information to our council. And that may be something that a charter can address. I would say if the one thing I feel as if there was a major failure in my drafting, and I will take this on all myself. My mistake was not being clearer about the role of the city administrator within the charter. As I read Carla and Deborah's article about their interview with Danny Williams recently, and Danny was like, well, I'm here as an advisor. And I thought to myself, well, that's not what we drafted, right? What we drafted was the city administrator really being, if we think about this in C-suite terms, the city administrator really being a COO, a chief operations officer, an operations officer.
That's what I thought he was supposed to be.
Right, an operations officer is not an advisor to a CEO. They literally implement things like payroll systems, right? So I think my drafting, maybe
Our drafting, right?
our drafting, but I think I was the one who actually pulled the language.
Yeah, but we
you know?
talked a lot about what title do we want to attach to this?
Right,
Chief Operating Officer, Chief Administrative Officer, we had 3 or 4
Yeah.
candidate names that we gave considerable
Right, but you didn't
discussion.
call him chief advisor.
No,
correct.
no,
So-
but the term officer was intentional, I guess administrator was intentional.
Right, but I mean, just in terms of the language under
That's
it.
right, that's
I
right.
don't know that we were as clear as we could have been, and I think that might be an area to consider and look at, you know.
That's actually a good point, actually, even though I didn't include that in our little write-up for you guys, but I think that is a really good idea to consider. Describing the role of the city administrator as not merely some advisor. This is a accountable, and he is actually accountable to council in some ways. He can't be fired, but the hiring is going through council, right? And he does report on certain budgetary things to council, et cetera, et cetera. We could make that stronger language. It's an interesting idea.
So that was just one of the areas I did wanna.
That's interesting. I
I
appreciate you raising that.
did wanna highlight that I think it wasn't drafted as tightly as it should have been,
Okay.
so my failure.
I did go through the effort to responding to each and every one of the questions.
It's a
Okay,
joint
you didn't
response.
have- you didn't
We
have to
agree
do
on
that.
both of them.
Thank you.
And
Why don't you email it to me and I'll circulate it to the commission.
okay, and
You've got printouts.
I've got printouts as well, but I will email it to you.
Why don't you give it to us though?
I will.
Thanks
Yeah.
very much for coming in, we appreciate it. And if you have further thoughts or suggestions you want to give us, just
Absolutely.
send us an email, give us a
so
call.
much.
Thank you.
That's great.
Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for coming.
See you guys.
Thanks. Good talking to you. And Harriet, I like your idea about, let's get a group together. Carla says hi.
This is public, right? So I can sit in and listen.
Oh, yeah, you can stay. You can-
Yay!
You gonna stay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Heck
okay.
yeah.
Well,
Hear
I'm
what
gonna catch you.
Leila has to say.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Whoa. Okay, Mayor, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. So we'll introduce everybody and then we'll do a little kind of preliminary. Keith?
I'm Keith Ellion and I live on Delwood, which is near the library on Maple Road.
I'm Roland Anglin, I live on Scarborough.
Jonathan Cecil, I live in Scarborough as well.
I'm Drew Herzig. For some reason, we've got into this, what street do you live on?
I don't think Judge Villo really cares.
No.
Sorry, no, but it's nice to know that
Yeah, yeah.
I'm pretty.
Yeah, I wanna live in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood.
And we all.
Yeah.
Harriet Applegate, Crest Road.
Greg Kluge, Stillman Road.
Graham Ball, Bradford.
Linda Striyevsky, Delamere. Welcome. We appreciate you coming here tonight and spending a little bit of time with us. Yeah, we've been called together as a Charter Review Commission to look at our charter in the sort of the aftermath of the changes to put an elected mayor in place and to advise our city council on whether there are additional charter amendments that might be considered. And also, there was a prior charter review commission a couple years ago that did a very extensive review of the charter. So we also were asked to look at what they did and see to what extent their work should be put forward for a ballot issue. Their work really wasn't put forth on the ballot because instead we had the elected mayor ballot initiative, which was a citizen-initiated ballot issue. But we specifically asked you to come here because we were interested in having understanding from you and a couple of other mayors as to how your city handles the interrelationship and the sort of balance of power, for lack of a better term, between the mayor and the city council, and what things that you think are helpful in that regard, whether they're in your charter ordinances or just sort of your habits, you know, what your protocols are.
Well, first of all, I'm honored that you asked me to come. And second of all, I served on city council for 8 years in the 90s. And then this is my 21st year as mayor.
Wow, okay.
So I got to have both positions, and I think having been the council person at large, right? I had that opportunity. I knew what I liked and what I didn't like. I also felt that after serving on 3 charter review commissions and being the chair, can't remember if it was the chair of 1 or 2. I mean, ours are elected by the people, by the way. We are not appointed. So I really felt when I came in as mayor that I wanted to make sure clearly that council had the opportunity to do their job.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed my 8 years on council, but I did not feel I was always able to do my job. Or, you know, sometimes I felt the administration stepped over. It's natural, right? However, when you sat down and talked about it, sometimes it got cleared up and sometimes it didn't. So there was always, you know, that little bit of frustration. But I will tell you one thing that I think in a lot of ways is, you know, a mayor quickly learns that, you know, if you can't work with your council, how are you gonna move your city forward? So I do think in some ways, pushing back a little bit, and I was pretty much alone in some things, it did change the dynamic. I came in and I said, why do we need a safety director? The mayor can do that job, why not get rid of the safety director and give half the money to the police, half to the fire? And, you know, they were like, oh, and it happened. I mean, I had to plead my case, I had to meet with the mayor, so I got that done. Then came part-time employees did not have medical. However, city council members all got it. So I sponsored legislation to get rid of that too, which really caused a problem because I didn't realize, even though my husband had his own business, he paid for our insurance. And I didn't know council got insurance, so they brought me the paperwork and said, hey, sign up for it. And I said to myself, why are we doing that? People helping in the service department aren't getting it, this, that. So it was rough because all but myself, the other 6 people, 5 had their own businesses, so that saved them a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what was important. What was important to look at what was right for the city. So, you know, I kind of felt like, well, I made my case and I got those 2 things through. So what I really learned from that was if you're a council person and you feel strongly about something, you can get it done.
So those were things you did as a council person?
Council person, right, back in the 90s. So now, lo and behold, I become the mayor. And I actually made a list of all the things that I wasn't going to do. Seriously, I did. And what were those? I do not go to a committee meeting unless I'm invited. I allow my city council to discuss things. I do present legislation, however, I do not go. I send the director who has helped me. I feel that, you know, being in the presence and not allowing city council that opportunity to really talk about things with someone who worked side by side with me is not it just didn't seem right, because you can get to me anytime, you know, council can call me, email me, text me, and I always get back to them. But they don't always have the opportunity to be with those directors who are going to help the mayor implement this. And I want them to know, you know, this is why we did it, this is who's gonna work on it. And if there's any real questions, you know, they're gonna be right next to me. And I think that shows trust to city council, that they have access to these directors. I also decided that I would not be in the budget meetings except when I was asked. Because I always felt like the mayor was there, you know, over us, so we could never have a really good discussion. And I always felt like they were trying to just railroad us through on it. So, you know, I worked with my city council presidents and I said, listen, you know that I've worked side by side with everybody on this budget, including yourselves, on your portion. I would like to have an opportunity to let my staff come in. I think it would be a good learning tool for them. I think it would behoove you to know who's really spending your money, right? And then you can call me in, whatever. And I said, and I told them, you know, ask the tough questions. And if you don't like if you only like 9 of the 12 items and you don't want the other ones, then you tell us that. If you say, hey, listen, you know, we've been talking to a lot of residents, this isn't quite what we think they would like their money spent on, give us some ideas and we'll go back to the board. So we really, our budget now is actually an enjoyable process, so that not only does the mayor and the administration get to be in this process, city council really gets a big role in it. And at the same time, the city council chairs of different committees, like you might be service, police, you might be planning and zoning, public utilities, whatever. I have my staff work with them and keep them abreast of everything all year long. Why? So that when it comes time to the budget, we don't have, oh, I didn't know about that. Oh, really? That's how much that cost? We never have that, because our council is always informed. Because I felt the one thing that I never had as a council person was really the power in that position. Because I'm not talking about power of, oh, you do this or you do that. It was the power of really being a true legislator. And no one should have the power over that budget the way it should be, except for city council. That's why people vote in representation, right? So I'm administering, my job is to administer that budget that city council has passed, and they know it like the back of their hands. And if they don't, they shouldn't pass it, right? So for me, you know, that was a huge thing, and I love the staff meetings after the budget hearings, because I listen, you know, and I ask certain questions, and they're so excited to sit with the city council. And they come in, and Ruth Gray, and I'll tell you what, you might want to even invite Ruth Gray, our council president here. Ruth and I have worked on a process, and Ruth says, come in with a version of what is gonna be different. What do you wanna sell us on, kind of a thing, you know, she doesn't say that, but what do you, you know, so when we spend all year we're already looking at what we're gonna propose. It makes your staff feel good about what they're doing, right? And at the same time, customer service. And they're really happy to go out at council has little meetings, we have neighborhood meetings, we have just like everywhere, you all have your meetings, your block parties. They love to go out and talk about this. So what I realized.
Your staff goes to the block parties?
Yeah. Oh yeah, our staff goes to the block parties. You know, we feel that the more people have knowledge, the more power they will have over their government. They will have over their neighborhoods, they will have over economic development, because knowledge is power. So, and like I said, I'm not talking about, I'm gonna fire you, or you're not gonna let somebody have the money to, have a money. And so for me, I really realized early on that, I'm gonna make sure that city council has their rights. And I brought my charter just in case you guys don't have it. I feel very strongly that they have access to every single one of my directors. And they know it. They don't abuse it. And sometimes they'll even come to me and say, hey, can you take care of this? And I'm like, sure. Do you want a follow-up with a director? That Mrs. Nash, had this complaint. And, and at first they'd be like, well, yeah, and I'm like, why don't you just contact the director yourself? If you feel you have more questions or something. And we have built this great system. Even when council people don't like me, they still really appreciate the fact that they have that access, that they can deliver to their residents who voted them in real customer service. I will tell you that John Fosbender has a meeting every month on housing. I can tell you that Ruth Gray has a meeting every month, and this is just with my staff, every month with planning and zoning and building and housing. I can tell you that Sarah Continenza works very closely with recreation, with us and the Community Engagement Committee with One South Euclid. I can tell you that Justin Tisdale on service, if there's anything going on, he knows. If there's
So
a
Mayor,
lack,
just to be clear, this level of access to directors going out into the community, all of this is something that you've implemented over your years as being a mayor?
Yes.
And then, can I ask two contextual questions?
Yes.
One, have you always been a mayor council by charter?
Yes.
And then two, when you said you wrote down the things you weren't gonna do, is that because the previous mayor or
It was
one of them
because
was
from-
doing it?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I served on council for 8 years. And like I said, I will be very honest with you. Sometimes you can step over as an administrator, right? Because you're living it every day and you feel like, we really need this money to make this work.
You don't know what's going on.
Yes, and to city council. And you know what? And I'll be really honest with you, putting everybody around the table sometimes says, when we put everybody around the table and they really do that and the brakes come on and we take the time, I will tell you sometimes, if not most of the time, either council or a director are right. You need people that are able to say, oh yeah, and it's very respectable. You know what, Mayor, we get it, blah, blah, blah. But we're not gonna give you $50,000 for this. We've noticed at all of our events and our council get-togethers with our residents and the block parties, we're hearing more about potholes than a storefront renovation program. And though you feel that this landlord has the money now, we're putting it in potholes. So then I have to go to that storefront run, and say, hey, listen, it's not gonna happen this time. However, June or July, if I see that more money's coming into the city than we're expected, let's say an extra $700,000, we as an administration feel very strongly that we will go to city council and try to make that case. Can't promise you, but we will do that. And in that relationship, city council will then trust us and say, you know what, the mayor's saying, yeah, we do have a little money, a wiggle room. We know that this landlord's been saving up money to match this. We'll give it to him. So to me, it's almost like a business arrangement.
As I recall though, because I've read your charter, at least selected portions of it.
I mean, at this point, which one haven't you written?
Well, only those 4 plus the model charter on some points, not cover to cover, but I've read pieces parts, but there isn't anything really extraordinary in your charter about any of this. This is just the way that you've chosen to work in your role as mayor with your city council and with your staff.
But I will tell you, the charter is very clear about the finances. And, I have to tell you, maybe hearing from me and hearing from Ruth Gray, or another council president, it is council's fiduciary responsibility. If they aren't doing that, they're not doing their job. Yes, they're there for your complaints and to show up at things. But where is the checks and balances in this? Government is not a business, right? It is a government. So it's truly, truly, the biggest check and balance is that your council approves that budget and then it goes from there. Now, council can't come back after that and say, we're gonna, Mayor, you can't use that money, whatever. They could, but they usually don't. They might come back and say, hey, that's going really well. Do you think you need a little bit of more money? Usually we say no. But it's, there should be a little butterfly in every mayor's stomach about the budget. They should never feel that they can go into that room and present a budget and you're gonna get the stamp. You should have a little butterfly that every one of you are gonna go through it. We're gonna have tough questions. You might say, yeah, you're not gonna get it, we want you to put the money here. And if you don't have that butterfly, then your council's not doing their job. And how does a council know if this is the budget, if they don't have a relationship with your directors?
Yeah.
To me, it was simple. And
This is a problem that we have here currently though, because the current mayor hasn't really permitted those relationships to develop with directors.
Has anybody talked to him about it? Okay, all right.
Again, this is a new form of government here. You moved into an established one. You had served on the council. You said, when I'm mayor, I'm gonna do it this way.
Right.
You made it your mission to improve those relations. We moved from a city council, city manager form of government to a city council mayor form of government. And bang, immediately things started falling off the chart.
I would love to have a city manager.
Instead of a mayor or in addition to?
Well, it would be great to even, or maybe the shaker model, a little bit of an administrator, because.
We have it in there.
We have.
Okay, because, we don't have that in South Euclid.
Yeah.
So there's, and if you ask my husband, there's hours that I spend doing things.
Oh, I'm sure.
That you have to, that an administrator does. Just like right now, we're really looking at our policy manual for our employees. Well, yes, we don't have a huge HR department, we have like one person working, and then, so.
It's a big job.
Yeah, do you know what I'm saying? But then at the same time you're doing that, you have 5 housing developments coming and you got and so some days I'm sitting there going, okay, the balls are in the air,
Yeah.
hope they don't drop. And oh, by the way, I won't be home till 10 tonight because at 5 o'clock, when those doors close, I have peace.
Quiet.
I do, I have peace, like I ran home, I was afraid I was gonna be late, I just wanted to come relaxed here. I'm like, I don't wanna come, and but I say to myself, if a mayor has an administrator, that to me is probably the biggest gift you could have given your mayor. And at the same time, it allows them to be able to do the high level stuff. Drill down into your neighborhoods, drill down into your economic development, drill down to how can we bring more engagement. It's kind of the big picture, drill down, and then, like we do this, like, you're all my directors, we meet and I'll say, oh, I got an idea, and they all start laughing. And I'll be like, I don't know if this is gonna work, but this is what I'm thinking. And then, people start getting in on it, and I'm like, well, we're not gonna really, but take it back. We'll get back together. And then, couple come into my office. I'm like, yeah. You know, I'm just telling you, you know, and then, you know, then somebody comes in, I think we can do like 50% of that. I go, you do? You know, and then they start telling me, and then, you know, we get back together, and it's really interesting to see the movements by the different directors. And I say to myself, okay, now we have to really go get council's, you know, how do I say it, their support for this. You know, but then here's something else. Being the administrator and the mayor, I'm now restructuring my planning, housing, and building department. My goal is to be able to help other cities. So I don't have to go to council about that, right? If they like the old way of structure, you know, I don't have, they can't interject themselves in that. Though they can say, come, you know, September and October, well, how's this gonna impact the budget? You know, and I'll be like, well, you know, my goal is that it's going to save us some money. You know, this putting, you know, this and that, we're gonna cut out that, whatever, you know, and they always smile at that. But you know, sometimes we deliver and sometimes we have to come back and say, this didn't work and this is why, and we're gonna get rid of it. And sometimes it hurts them because it's something they like. But so you have to, I don't think you should look at your charter for now. Like whatever your issues are now, I think you have to look at what you want for your city. You know, like you said, this is your first go, got an administrator. If you like what the mayor's, the portion about the mayor, maybe you focus on the administrative part. You know, those kind of things, you know, I think that, you know, you have to look at what you like for this, like, you know, we're gonna go into charter review, well, we'll have our election this year, and then next year we'll go into charter review, you know, I think there's things in here that need to be changed or some things need to be added, because it's a different time. Like Harriet said.
You were in the room for that, huh?
Oh yeah, no, Harriet's 100% true.
Yeah.
Though you don't see it as much here, but I wouldn't wanna be in Southern Ohio for some of this stuff. But you know, I just say to myself, you know, what is it that you like about your charter? Because that's gonna form your community. And I think that's what you're about right now, is looking at your charter, listening to everything, and then saying, okay, this is the community we want. And then, I don't know, does your mayor like communicate with you at all? Cause you could always talk to the mayor about it, you know, our charter
With the
review,
public generally or with the Charter Review Commission?
charter review commission.
He hasn't come to see us yet.
Oh, okay. Cause like,
We've invited him.
He's been invited, yeah.
because we're invited, they invite all of our directors, they invite the chiefs, they invite me, they invite boards and commissions, they do public meetings,
They meeting the Charter Review Commission?
And you said yours was elected?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, ours is elected.
so do you always have one kind of active looking at things?
No.
Or- Okay.
Every 10 years.
Oh, you still are, okay.
Yeah, we're every 10 years. But I will tell you, it's always a discussion, right? You can always come, or something can be initiated.
Now, does your city council have the authority to make charter amendments?
Yes.
Okay, so you
Yes.
can tinker with it between the 10 year
Right,
council.
absolutely.
All right.
You know, I would say that a lot of our legislation is really looking at housing, building, you know, this is all well and good, but this isn't going to get people to move to your city, right? This isn't going to,
So he said, I wanna move there, they've got a great charter.
right. This isn't gonna give you the emerging consumers to move here, right? So the average age in South Euclid is 35. It was in the 60s when I took over.
Wow.
We made it, everything we looked at was about that. So this, and we do go back to this, you know, like, however, I keep telling them, it's more about what's gonna bring people to your community? And though I love my charter, it's not gonna bring people to my community. So I think you're tasked with something big. And I think you're tasked with making it like, what kind of city do you want to be? You know, and that administrator. I would. We're not big enough though, so.
Well, it's an interesting point because our charter, when it was changed, did provide for both an elected mayor and a city administrator. And as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the thinking behind that was to have a city administrator who would deal with the day-to-day operations stuff so that the mayor could think big thoughts and be proactive and really focus on moving the ball in terms of what the city needs.
Well, you
We haven't yet achieved that.
So, you know, the thing about Cleveland Heights is, you know, when I got married in 1979 and we rented for 3 years in South Euclid, and every time I wanted to buy, you know, those first 3 years, I wanted to buy in Cleveland Heights, we could never afford it. Then, you know, we bought a house, and then 5 years later, owning that house, it came back here and I couldn't afford it. Because everybody wanted to be in Cleveland Heights, and the houses were incredible. And so then when I had the opportunity to become mayor, what community did I turn to was Cleveland Heights. Rick Wagner, Ed Kelly, Bob Downey, I mean, I could just, all of them. Susanna, I mean, they spent a lot of time with me. And then, you know, Shaker Heights Police Chief, I went and looked at 3 different departments, and I felt that was the department that probably was most, you know, conducive to South Euclid. So I can tell you that, you know, Cleveland Heights has been this beacon for years. And, you know, this is probably kind of bold to say, but if I had to drive in here every day and look at Severance.
Yep.
You know, I had to go by Cedar Center and look at that. It had to go.
Just think of City Hall was outside of Cedar Center.
Yeah.
You see it every day.
Yeah, so do you know what I mean? Like you have, to me, it's like, it's what your passion is. What is it that you want? And when you look at, you know, that, I don't know if you can put that into charter,
Right.
right? I don't know.
But we could put a more empowered city administrator in for sure. We're hearing that from 2 people, that could be huge, because then that frees you as the mayor to be more aspirational and to get bigger picture and not always have, I gotta work at my to-do list, I don't have time to be imaginative.
Right, and you know, the thing is, I think the current person you have could have, probably does have bold ideas. Because that's what he was always known for. I admired him for it. So, you know, I don't know, you know, where it's at, but also you're at a new spot for everybody, like you said. It's a new thing. You know, for your city councils, they might wanna go see other city councils. I had a council president that I dragged around to a few different council meetings to see them, because I felt that he had never served in any capacity like that. Now he's council president, and I said, come with me. I'm not saying you're not doing a good job, but just come with me. And, you know, he was grateful. He said, you know, I never thought of doing this, I never thought of doing that. And I said, yeah. Everybody has their own style, you can see what someone's style is like.
Right.
And I think that was huge, you know, but that again was me saying, oh boy, you know, either this person's gonna really succeed and have a legacy as the council president, or they might stumble a little bit. Not because of they didn't have the heart, they just never did it before.
Sure.
It sounds like you have a really excellent government culture in South Euclid, I'm sure in no small part due to your own skill at being a mayor. But I mean, other than like making clear about where the finances lie and a city administrator, are there any levers that you feel like we could pull to shape the culture of a Cleveland Heights city government?
So I do think that your administrative position is a really big opening. You know, when I looked at your charter, I really felt that. I do feel that communication, and I don't know how you build that into a charter. That is the one thing, I looked at my charter, I looked at your charter, I looked at, I went outside, I looked at like Willoughby's, I looked at, is it Twinsburg or Madison? I thought, you know what, I'm just going out there. After, you know, I was, and I'm like, how do you get that communication? I think that's something that I don't know if you can tackle that, but it seems to me that someone needs to be a hero. I don't know if it's council, the president, the mayor, but it's like there's, someone has to be a hero, there's gotta be some kind of communication, so where does that come to? Is it the administrator? Is it that the president of council must meet X amount of times with the mayor? X amount of times with the administrator? Is it where, you know, each department head must report at a meeting? Like, you know, at our meetings, they're all there by Zoom or you know, in person. I asked them, do you have a report? I would say, you know, finance usually doesn't because they're in a meeting prior to, and who's the other one that doesn't always have one? Maybe like police and fire, not every time, but one of them always will kind of do it, just so people know. We were at, and it could be short. We were at a fire, blah, blah, blah. Though every time there is anything of great importance, like we just had a fire this weekend, the fire chief, I've instructed them that they send an email to city council. When we had, what you just saw not too long ago, we had a man who came in and actually, you know, took the mother of his children, drove around with her and everything. Immediately, the chief of police sends an email to city council. You wanna know why? Because their residents are gonna ask them, I've seen this on Nextdoor, I've seen it on Facebook, you know, oh my gosh, you know, this channel had it, this channel, and then I don't know, I'd feel pretty stupid if I didn't know what was going on, right? Or I have been out, click, 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 click. I just saw 6 police cars go down my street. This is a council person. So I have to step out what I'm doing. I'm calling the chief who doesn't know yet because the officer in charge hasn't let him know. But I'm like, we need to know immediately. This just went down a council person street. They're getting calls. They need to know what's going on. You know, that's just respect. So for me, I don't know how you can build that into a charter, but maybe you guys could look at communication paths. I don't know. I know.
No, well, it's
you were an
a good
executive
point.
director.
No, it's a point, because we had, I mean, one of the things that we have batted around a little bit is whether the charter should specify the directors have to attend city council meetings, because now they don't.
Ours do.
I know a lot of city councils, they do, or at least they, on a cycle, they.
But that's your policy, it's not your, that's your policy.
No, we actually put in an actual, in
Ordinance or
we
charter?
we made an amendment about it. You know,
In the charter?
no, not in the charter,
But
we did,
ordinance,
council sponsored it. Because, you know, you gotta remember, if council sponsors that, you gotta do it, right?
It seems to me that you've intentionally built a culture of trust so that your staff don't feel that they're going to be attacked or sideswiped. When you talked about sending them alone to budget meetings, I know in our experience, like they would have felt abandoned, you know, it's like you sent me in there, you know, among the wolves kind of thing to defend something like that, but you've built up enough trust, mutual trust, that nobody feels like they're gonna get a hatchet job when they're just, you know, trying to be part of the communication.
So in our city, a city council person chairs a committee and then 2 members are on it, right? Well, every one of those committees match up to the different directors.
Right.
So when you walk into the budget meeting, you've been with that person all year. You know, like my chief just contacted the chair of the safety, our fire chief did. Why? Because none of our captains wanna go for the assistant or the chief's position right now when he retires. They're just, you know, some are teaching, some are, it's interesting. They're not, so the chief had to go to the chair of the safety committee and say, listen, there's 2 or 3 lieutenants that would do this because, you know, they're not there teaching and all, they haven't gotten to that.
Yeah.
And so, and you know, a lot of them are younger, have kids. So instead of 3 captains, I would like to change the ordinance to say 4 for this period of time. Because this will allow me to make a lieutenant the captain and that captain can apply. Well, you can't, in government, in business, you'd be able to do that, right? In government, you have to have that legislation in those steps. So of course, Chanel's on the phone with, yep, and he typed a memo attached to the legislation that will be going to all of city council this Monday. However, none of city council has seen it yet. We know it's gonna have to go to committee. But Chanel will shepherd that through with the chief by her side. To me, that council per chair knows what's going on. The 3 committee members know what's going on, and together we'll get this through. That is being true legislative, you know, and then we'll get a thing like, hey, I'm thinking this idea, have you found legislation for this? Clerk's looking, we're looking, the chief's looking, or the service director's looking, so we now have this collaborative relationship. But I don't think you could have anything without both council and the administration working together. You just can't, I just don't know how you,
We're trying that and it isn't working.
yeah. And you know, the thing is, there's no threat to it.
See, that's the missing element here. There is this element of threat and antagonism, but you've established an of trust where everyone feels more or less safe in their communications, their functions, their.
And the funny thing is, you know, sometimes a council member will come up with this great idea, we put the legislation together. And I don't know if you ever noticed, but you won't see my name in the paper very often because I feel if you came to us and you shepherd this, you should get that, you should be able to speak about it, this and that, it's not about the mayor. But the funny thing, when you're out in public, who gets all the credit?
Mayor.
The mayor. And then I'll say, well, you know, it really was your council person, Sarah Continenza. Oh, really? Well, how was that? And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, oh boy, you know, and I kind of chuckle and, you know, and then if a council person's around and they hear that, they're like, well, thanks, Mayor. You know, and I'm like, well, no, really, it was your idea. It wasn't my idea. And they're like, well, no, but you executed it. And that's probably why.
Well, you've got a great spirit of teamwork, as Graham said, you've got a great culture, and it's a wonderful thing.
Well, thank you.
Wonderful thing.
I think you'll reach it.
I hope so.
I do.
I hope so.
And I think with looking at where you're at, I mean, you know, I don't know all of you, but I know Harriet has executive experience, so, you know, and she's worked for a lot of different people. You know, I have to tell you, I just feel that you have such a great opportunity here to just make some changes. And I don't know what they are for you, but I'm excited for you in a lot of ways. I hope you don't feel too frustrated, you know, but it's like a recipe, right?
Thank you so much for your time, we really appreciate it.
And I will tell you, you might wanna get Ruth Gray in here
Yeah,
because
I appreciate that.
she could talk about the other end of what we do.
Yeah, no, that's a great
It might
idea.
be, you know,
Thank you.
Just to tie back to some of my comments, Harriet,
Pardon?
just for you, Harriet, when I
Thank you,
say maturity in
Oh,
that,
yeah.
it's kind of like understanding that you can use the budget,
Yeah, no, I get it.
which I don't mean
Yeah.
any individual, but
Yeah.
our council understanding those things, that's
Yeah.
all.
no, you're right, that's a huge thing is, I don't, like I said, and it took me a while when I would look at council. This is your fiduciary responsibility, this ain't mine. I don't answer to everybody about that, because I don't have a vote. I administer over this, and if you tell me you're not giving me money, I just say, well, then you go to your council person, because they're not giving me money for those potholes. And they call them.
Sticking around for interesting.
It's kind of, you know, but have a good night and thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else for you, let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
for all
for
the
your
work you
time.
put into this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, I didn't know, well, I know you said you had it, but if anybody else wants to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gene.
Next.
Hi,
Hi, Kyle.
good to see you.
So,
You wanna come up
Get my
and
you
card
have a
out,
seat.
everyone.
Have a seat and we'll do a round of introductions, so you know everybody's name.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Do you want my card?
Sure.
Yeah, the card is helpful because it has the
Thanks.
sample ballot on the back.
Okay, thank you.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so it's usually when I'm out and about, people ask me, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, have you heard of ranked choice voting? And it's easy show and tell. It's how they vote in Maine and Alaska. Instead of just picking one, you rank your choices. That way more parties and candidates can run. You have more confidence that your vote will matter. And when we're out canvassing, most of the time that's all it really takes to get people to say, well, yeah, I want more choices. Let's do it.
So let's go around the table and introduce first and
I'm Keith Elliott.
Roland Anglin.
Nice to meet you.
me.
Sonia Charles.
Kyle Herman.
Jonathan Cecil?
I'm Drew Herzig, I'm the green.
Okay.
Harriet Applegate.
Greg Kluge.
Graham Ball.
Linda Striyevsky.
Good to see you.
Well, thanks very much for
Advisor.
Hello.
thanks very much for coming tonight. We appreciate your time. So we asked you here to give us a few thoughts about ranked choice voting, knowing you're an expert.
Yeah, of course, and I know that we have limited time. I had like a brief presentation, like that is like the usual that we give that I chopped down, but it's very ranked choice voting, like 101. So is everyone like familiar with
No.
ranked choice voting? Okay, then we could run through it real quick if you want me to
put it up?
Yes, please.
Do you have it?
If it's if it's easy to access, but yeah, in the meantime, Sonia Charles is
I don't know.
professor at Cleveland State and a volunteer with Rank the Vote Ohio. She's one of our speakers in training, so I invited her along today. She's also a resident here in Cleveland Heights.
Oh, boy.
Do you have the USB or?
USB.
Oh, no, sorry, I thought I emailed it to Harriet.
Oh.
Oh,
Okay,
Oh.
Okay.
I didn't realize that.
so, okay.
Yeah, oh, sorry,
No, it's fine. We can skip the visuals. I mean, the most important thing is the sample ballot. And if you go to our website, you can also sign up to receive our emails, also see some of the visuals on our website on the About Ranked Choice Voting. But the simple way to explain it is how I did earlier. It's just instead of picking one, you rank your choices. That way more parties and candidates can run. And I also have a unique perspective on this. I was elected to city council at large in Stowe this past November. I know Stowe's a bit smaller than Cleveland Heights, but it made me appreciate running in a like pick up 2-3 race versus a ranked choice voting race. And it's just a lot more intuitive to voters when they can vote honestly about their choices instead of feeling like they are stuck having to bullet vote because they only want, they may have a favorite and they don't want to hurt them by including another and things like that. But traditionally, ranked choice voting is used for single winner elections. Most races are single winner inherently, like the mayor and ward seats. I know that's something you may be considering, but when it's applied to at-large seats, it has the cool effect of achieving proportional representation because instead of like in a single winner race with ranked choice voting, it solves a problem that we have in Ohio that our current elections don't require a majority to win. So if more than 2 candidates run, someone can win with 30 or 40% of the vote, which happens a lot in municipal races actually. And so in multi-winner races, that threshold, instead of being 50%, it is divided according to the number of seats that are being elected. So, for example, in a 3-seat at-large race, such as the one that I was in, that quota would have been 25%. And so that's the amount that the lowest amount that 3 candidates can get, but not 4. because you can have a four-way tie if everyone had exactly 25%. And so the way it works is if no candidate gets a majority in the single winner, or if no candidate gets to the threshold for the multi-winner, then the voters' choices, it's kind of like having a runoff. You can think of your choices as each round as like a runoff election. So like in Georgia, they have an entire second runoff election that is very wasteful and costly, but we call ranked choice voting an instant runoff because instead of having to go back to voters and saying like, oh, who would your next choice have been, then we already have that information. So if no one gets the threshold, the candidate with the lowest number for first choices is eliminated. And then instead of those votes being wasted, they will be counted for the voters' second choices. And the process repeats until you have a majority in a single winner race, or until you have as many elected members as you have seats in a multi-winner race.
Have you found using the term instant runoff gets more understanding?
Yeah.
You know, there's also the jungle, there's all sorts of different terminologies,
Right.
slightly different things, but
True.
instant runoff, because a lot of us, as you know, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir, ranked choice voting, the United States no longer leads the world in math skills. Trying to explain the math in different scenarios of ranked choice voting just leaves people
Right.
completely glazed over kind of thing. But instant runoff seems to be understandable, even if they wouldn't understand the math for that.
Right, and especially because of the news in recent years with the Georgia runoffs, people understand intuitively the runoffs, and that's why we exist as an organization, Rank the Vote Ohio. We're a nonpartisan nonprofit. We're about helping with that, like public education. We also work with League of Women Voters and other groups to help with that because we know it can be tricky for people to understand at first. But once voters use ranked choice voting, the vast majority say it's simple. We've seen the statistics from New York, Alaska, where 85-90% or more of voters say that it was simple and easy to use after they use it. And so there is a learning curve,
Yes.
but
If we could implement it without having to explain it, it would be so much easier.
Well, I mean, I think that the explanation is you rank order your choices.
Yes.
And it is very easy for the voter to do that. You know, the voter says, I like you best, you second best, you third best, you fourth best. Bing, 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 bing. It's very easy to use.
That part, yes, but then when you start to say, but then after, if we don't get, you know, a clear winner, then we do this math where the last person, their votes are distributed and the blah, blah, blah kind of thing. That's where it gets really, I shared with this a YouTube video where they did like Post-its. They just did colored Post-its. You stacked your votes and then they just did that. And it's like, wow, the visual was really thing. But when you're explaining it verbally to trying to say, okay, in such and such a race, then the fourth person, their vote is distributed according to how the block. It gets really, really tricky, and it's frustrating because we want to sell. Some of us really believe in it. We want to sell this to the public, trying to figure out the best way to get people to support it, you know, without black boxing it, kind of a thing. To say this is how it works.
right.
Do you think, I mean, thinking about that and sort of like selling it, right? Maybe not getting bogged down into the distributing numbers,
Yes.
but like you say that, and then the next thing I could tell that person is, okay, so your first choice unfortunately didn't make it. So now your voice still counts, we go to your second choice, and just not even have to be like, and all these numbers go here, and these
Yeah.
are just like, and then your voice, like
I've gone to
selling that part of it.
presentations where they're
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
this algebra on the black.
Right. And
It's too bad because Americans seem to be math phobic at this point. I don't know why, but when you say that, but then your second choice rises up, and then if that doesn't work, your third choice, that is, and I appreciate, because if we're gonna write this into a charter or an ordinance, we do have to have the math. We do have to have how it will function in this particular setting. But to pitch it to the public, it's any information or findings you have about the most accessible explanations or
the most important thing is to show them a sample ballot, get them in the driver's seat, and imagine how and keep it apolitical, or unless you know your audience.
or ice cream flavors or something.
Yeah, but people can intuitively understand.
Yes,
If you think back to the 2000 election with Ralph Nader being called a spoiler, and all this fear now of spoiler effect, and in 2024, people are like, well, look at who we have to choose from. That we're having great success just saying, hey, rank choice voting. You can rank your choices, and know that your vote will count for your highest choice who is still in the race. And most of the time when we're out on the street, people are just like, oh, well, I don't even care about politics, but I want more choices. And so that would get me to care.
Yeah.
And so they aren't asking the question of like, well, how's my vote counted? Like, it's a good question, but
You
it's,
got half an hour, yes.
no, but yeah, but like, honestly, it's people like the experts in this room who are gonna be asking the question of like, wait, how is it counted? But the people on the street are just like, burn the system down, like, I want more choices, I don't care how I get them, yeah.
So Kyle, excuse me, you mentioned proportional representation is a natural result of when there's more than one seat. Can you
Yes.
just give me 2 words on that, please? I don't see that clearly.
Yeah, so if you it allows for there to be more factions, essentially, of like different lanes of candidates running, so that if someone is seen as being from like a minor party, for example, or minor faction, they still have a good chance of hitting that lower quota. And so if they're more likely to hit that 25% than they would be likely to hit that 50%. So if you had a like relatively like purple city like Stowe, then you might get like in a 3-seat race, you might get a Republican, a Democrat, and a moderate. And so it's proportional instead of just having that 50% threshold where you might only get like the Republican or the Democrat, and then the vast majority of people are unhappy. But it becomes more proportional the larger the number of seats that you have. Yeah.
It sounds like the European Parliament.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, the thing of it is,
But that's
it's
Europe.
counterposed to winner take all. Where, 49.99% of people could not be represented.
I understand. And I'm just trying to have the idea so I can explain it to somebody else.
Right.
Yeah, part of it is a question of scale, as you said, and that's why another thing we're looking at is possibly having hybrid wards and at-large councils kind of thing, which complicates the ranked choice voting, as you said, but nonetheless, it makes it more representative for the people who might be able to afford to run in a ward but couldn't run citywide.
And so it would actually be more consistent to have ranked choice voting for wards and at large in the same race, because in all the races you're ranking your choices. The only difference is how they're counted, which is most people don't really care about. But the current system of having at large, where if there are like 3 seats up and it's a vote for up to 3, that's even more confusing for people and puts them in a harder like moral position of saying, do I want to vote my conscience of like all 3 by giving 3 votes to different people, or of only voting for my first choice? They can rank them more honestly with RCV.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point. Especially in this day and age where people mostly vote against,
The lesser of the two evils.
yeah, the lesser, so there's no, it eliminates the lesser of evils completely, because you don't hurt your first choice by when you rank them.
Which I've heard described as the tyranny of the duopoly.
Yeah. And it also helps with the polarization problem, because candidates are incentivized to cooperate more, not just when they're running, but also when they're governing, to show that they're working collaboratively, because they want to be everyone's second choice, even if they can't be their first, as opposed to the winner take all system where they're just like slash and burn.
And then you have first runner-up and Miss Hospitality and all sorts of people who can get into the mix kind of a thing.
Right.
So it's interesting to hear that you say it really is achievable to do a mixed ward and at-large ranked choice voting, because when I was reading through some text, it was sort of like these are completely 2 different spheres that are just, it's very hard to make them interact.
Me too, I thought you do one or the other, you can't.
Well, I mean, it's like Stowe has a mixed system where we have 3 at-large seats and we have 4 ward seats. And so our ward seats are, vote for 1, and our at-large are vote for up to 3. And so by switching them all to ranked choice voting, it would actually make them more consistent. But this book, I just wanted to mention, if you have a chance to look it up, it's called Proportional Representation Election Reform in Ohio by Kathleen Barber, who was a professor at John Carroll and heavily involved in Cuyahoga County politics before she died. But she wrote the book on the history of ranked choice voting in Ohio. It actually started in Cleveland in 1913 for single winner ward seats. And then Ashtabula was the first city in the US in 1915 to use it for proportional representation. And it was also used in Cincinnati, Toledo, and Hamilton. And so this has been done for more than 100 years. And groups like the League of Women Voters were behind it back then. They still are. And so, yes, there's like an education curve, but it's not insurmountable. And people actually liked it a lot. It helped to increase diversity of representation, not only in terms of party and ideology, but also in terms of ethnicity, race, gender. And actually, that's why there was eventually a backlash against it. And so it sort of came ahead of its time, and now people are like, hey, we're ready to bring it back.
I can tell you from Cincinnati. Cincinnati had it the longest. I lived 30 years in Cincinnati, and Cincinnati had it from 1925 to 1955. It was thrown out. The parties don't like it. The parties like it eliminates backroom deals and, you know, the big shots deciding who's going to run.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, the Republican Party in Hamilton County was much more powerful than the Democratic Party, and they were the corrupt party in the progressive era, and so the Republican Party tried to throw out proportional representation for 5 elections, and they used a race baiting campaign. They went after because from 25 to 55, Cincinnati was often awarded the distinction of being the best governed city in the country. And so there was going to be because it was combined at that time with the city manager form of government, the council decided the mayor, and there were always African Americans on the council, in proportion to how many African Americans lived in the city. And Cincinnati was going to have the nation's first black mayor because of proportional representation. So the Republican Party used the same stuff that J. Edgar Hoover did to Martin Luther King. They did that to Ted Berry in Cincinnati. Yeah, and they finally, after 5 elections, were able to use this race baiting campaign to throw it out.
So question, are charters the only mechanism?
Yes. In Ohio, charter cities have a constitutional right to use ranked choice voting that was decided in a 1923 Ohio Supreme Court case. And so under home rule in the Ohio Constitution, any city that amends its charter to use ranked choice voting may use it.
And the Cuyahoga Board of Elections said, well, if somebody forces us to do that, we'll figure out how to do it.
Exactly, yes.
This summer at the Kane Park Art Festival, I ran into a canvasser that may be affiliated with your organization who was proselytizing about this. And I guess my question is, what have you found in your experience in Cleveland Heights? Is the political reception of residents? How do people feel about this in Cleveland Heights specifically?
Very positive. So we did have canvassers that were trying to focus more on University Heights over the summer, but I know y'all have a lot of joint events and there was spillover into Cleveland Heights, but from both communities, very encouraging and receptive. We do prefer to call it public education more than proselytizing. but point taken, yeah.
Was it University Heights because it was possibly going to be?
Yeah, because their charter review committee had recommended it to their council, and so we were trying to show local support, help with public education, and they said the only reason that they didn't put it on the ballot was because the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections told them they didn't know if they could do it yet, and since then we were able to clarify that they will do it if you pass it.
So what obstacles do you see to bring that about? Is it just education?
That's the biggest obstacle for sure.
Do you so there's no other say like a Republican counterattack or something like that you anticipate or something?
Well, I mean, currently at the State House, there is a bill that's co-sponsored by a Republican from a deep red district and a Democrat from a deep blue district. They're both party boss types. They want to suppress competition, and so they're trying to nip it in the bud before it gets popular, before people start using it. And so we don't think it's actually going to pass. We have been working with people in Columbus who've been telling us that it's unlikely to get through the House, even if it is likely to get through the Senate. But even then, they recognize that they can't outright ban ranked choice voting because it's constitutional. So they're trying to coerce cities to not use it by threatening to withhold local government funds. So the likelihood of that happening is very small, and so we don't think that should be a deterrent.
And ironically, the reason for that is squabbling even within party amongst the Republicans. One guy hates the other guy, so he doesn't want
his bill
so
to
they
go
can't
through.
pass
Yeah.
legislation.
So can I just clarify, so in your assessment in the city of Cleveland Heights, there is not a counterforce, an existing counterforce to this movement, moving in this direction, and according to your, at least as far as you know?
Not that I've heard of or
Okay.
seen.
Well, there wouldn't be until somebody was really proposing.
Well, I don't know, there's a lot of negativity in the world these days, so.
But the other thing about proportional, or this system, ranked choice voting, I think of it as proportional representation, is that it helps minorities.
Well, isn't it awful?
The results give majority rule wins, but significant minorities can get their, like in Cleveland Heights, we would have an Orthodox member of council because the Orthodox community they would vote, their number one choice would be the, as long as somebody ran. So you would have, this, so who would object, right? I mean, except maybe,
Well, our situation is that we can propose charter amendments to the city council, but the city council votes to put them on the ballot or not. So they, just like with universities, they can suppress something. If the city council, the 7 members are not convinced that it's a good idea, and that's the bottleneck that we're having to look at.
Right, and if there's anything that we can do to help with like the education aspect, you have my contact info, we'd be happy to help. We'd also recommend giving them options for potential charter amendments instead of just having like RCV be like one option where you like mix the like single winner with the multi-winner. You might want to frame it more as, hey, you could start with a single winner just for the mayor and like see how it goes, and then maybe later we can consider like the proportional representation and things like that.
Do you have those amendments already written that we can?
I have full faith in your legal counsel
You live in
to
Cleveland Heights,
assist
you can,
with
start
that.
feeding us text,
Well, I think they do have something written for University Heights that we could
Yeah.
probably start
We
with
looked
like a
at grabbing
draft
that, but that
yeah.
that
We have it.
We have it.
Yeah, that's very thorough though, I mean,
And-
kind of blindingly thorough in a way, I was
And
trying to
if you-
read through it.
If you do want help developing draft language, we can connect you with some national experts who also helped with University Heights as well.
It probably has to be blindingly
It
complicated.
does, it absolutely does.
Yeah, well, they went into the actual mathematical detail of how they would do this.
You have to.
It has to be in that kind of thing, but it's like presenting that to an unproselytized city council.
Well, I think the real lift, if you propose anything that changes the way that elected officials get elected, human nature tells me that their first thought is going to be, how does this affect moi? And that's just natural. And you have to overcome fear of the unknown among people for whom the known has worked pretty well.
So one thing I don't understand, so what's the downside of ranked choice voting?
People claim it's confusing. That's been our biggest barrier.
And as Harriet said, that the party mechanisms don't like it because they like to control their, both the DNC and the RNC.
Yeah,
It's like they want, you have to work with us if you want to get on the ballot.
And incumbent politicians are inherently skeptical.
Yes.
Yeah.
but
Might
ironically.
change a system that they succeeded at.
Yeah.
Ironically, even though I'm really pleased to hear that it can work with district, a hybrid system or a strict,
Yeah.
but I mean, in our council, we've got 2 council members who live in the state, 4 council, on the same street, 4 council members who live in the same ward. I mean, within, feet of each other.
Okay.
And so it's like, none of them are gonna wanna go with a district system because we
Yeah,
all
but-
end up running against each other for,
Yeah, but there's something weird about this town. I mean, no, like 3 of us on this committee live on the same street and have never met each other. An additional 2 people, like, it's weird.
You guys gotta get out more.
Yeah, right?
well, no, they gotta
block
stay on their own
party?
street more.
I've never
block
attended,
party
I've never attended it.
Oh.
You'd meet my parents.
Oh my God.
Can I ask, we know University Heights is taking a lot, big steps in this direction. Has anybody else done that in Ohio that you know of?
Not as far as University Heights. We have been talking with some folks in other communities that have expressed interest. The Charterites in Cincinnati are thinking about trying to go for an amendment again in 2024 because they've come close, very close, their previous few times. But most of the cities we're talking to are looking at 2025, like Hudson and Stowe have their charter review commissions in 2025 and are more likely to go for it then.
Strategically, are you thinking a non-presidential year might be a better time to try and, trying to figure out, is this the one we want to propose, or do we want to wait and let somebody else propose it here in Cleveland? Because we are proposing, if we get in the deadline in time, we'll go on the November ballot.
Okay.
Well, maybe, we don't know that.
Maybe, and we
Because
might not
council
wanna
has to
go
move it
with
forward.
that.
Because council has to decide when
Yeah, I brought that
council
up.
has to decide if they would like to do it this year or next year, and I raised that with Council President Kuda just to see if there was some burning desire to put it on the ballot this year, and he seemed very blasé about this year versus next year.
Yeah.
Now, that's just one person,
Yes, yeah.
but
But I was asking about strategies as far as on their side goes.
So,
But part of it is like,
Why?
we figured more people will vote in a presidential election.
right.
To me, that's more democratic to put it out there kind of thing, but then also you get more possibly naive voters instead of saying uninformed kind of thing. So it's just, anyhow, if you have thoughts about that, it's a future.
It's a complicated strategic question. Like in 2020, Massachusetts and Alaska both had it statewide on the ballot, thinking that, we're going to have a more progressive turnout that should favor reform. And it failed in Massachusetts, but it passed in Alaska. And so in Massachusetts, they were saying, we wish we got crowded out by the presidential election and all that stuff. But in Alaska, it helped. So it's hard to tell.
Well, the thing about, when you have a larger number of voters, there you have a larger number of lesser informed
That's been
voters.
your argument.
And, you also have this, again, when you have a larger number of voters, you often have this inclination to vote no on anything that's big or long or is challenging. So, because people, don't want change, and they're gonna be less educated. So, I think for anything that we're proposing, we want voters who might even be interested in reading what it is we're proposing. And those who don't wanna read what we're proposing are gonna overwhelmingly vote no,
we could give them cliff notes.
even with
Oh, no, go ahead.
It also depends a lot on the amount of support from like local leaders, like
Right.
council and the mayor. Like if they put it on the ballot, a lot of times in local races, people would be supportive just because they know that their elected officials are
Right,
supportive.
right.
And if it were on a ballot, say in Cleveland Heights, your organization would probably be trying to do as much public education in Cleveland Heights as
We
possible.
will help however we can, yeah, and we have a lot of volunteers in the area, yeah.
So, excuse me, logistical question. When are we leaving?
Tonight,
Yes.
whenever you all want.
Cool, because you had another 15 for the public input after this, and it's already.
that
I'm just trying to get a feel.
I actually put that on the agenda when we didn't have all these speakers lined up.
Got it.
So we can bring this to a close whenever people wanna bring it to a close.
Thank you.
I don't wanna keep you here indefinitely.
Professor, did you have something more you wanted to add there?
Oh, I was just gonna ask a clarification because I just don't know. So whatever you guys recommend to the council, then they can just put things on the ballot, or would things have to go through like an amendment process? How does
Well,
that?
they would, if we would propose language and they could decide to take some or all of it, pieces, parts, or all, and say, well, we'll put this on the ballot.
Okay, yeah.
Now, if they decided not to put things on the ballot and there was a group of citizens that wanted it to go on the ballot, we could have a citizen-initiated
Okay,
ballot issue, but that's a little more
So
complicated.
it
That's
can
how
go
we got an elected mayor.
Right.
It's a citizen-initiated ballot issue.
right, okay, thank you.
I think it takes 5 city council members, right, to pass it, to put it on the ballot.
Maybe, but don't quote me on that.
That was more than a
I think that may be true. Yeah, we'll quote Greg on that.
Maybe Lee knows, is it 5 to put on the ballot?
just done that to begin with.
I just want to say thank you for coming. It's been very helpful. I'm speaking for everybody. It's very, very helpful for you to come and speak to us. Unfortunately, we can't make any promises right now. You know what I mean? But it's very helpful for you to come and explain it.
But we're having our public meeting on the 12th, and this is one of the short list of topics we're going to have up for discussion at breakout groups. So hopefully the people of Cleveland Heights will give us some input.
That'd be great.
I'm actually
It's a
planning to be
public
at that
meeting.
meeting.
Oh,
I
please
signed up for
register.
that one, and then Kyle invited me to come to this one too, so.
No, and tell your friends. I mean, we hope to get a nice turnout. We'd like to hear what do our residents want.
And both of you, would it be okay, whatever you sent to Harriet, if she sends us to the rest of
Yes,
us?
of
so we can
course.
just
Yeah,
look
I
at
didn't
it
know you
on
were
the-
sending me anything, I'm sorry.
No worries. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, appreciate your time. So,
Motion
anything
to
else?
adjourn.
You wanna move to adjourn?
Well, the one thing I wanted to add before that is that we did get an email from the public to our CRC account.
Do you want me to print it out for the meeting tomorrow?
Just
Three
one,
questions
just
too. I don't know who wants to respond to it.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, print it out for tomorrow.
Okay, because it's less a comment, more questions, and I don't know if you guys wanna talk about how you respond to it.
Can I just say, why don't you print it out, give it to us, let us have it, and then we can just decide among ourselves.
Or I'll forward it to you.
Yeah, or forward it to us.
Yeah, we could make a decision tomorrow night what to do about it. I mean, it sounds like it's not necessarily something that's within our heads to answer anyway, but we might have to just politely say, ask
Heard.
city council.
Yeah, we can say her.
Why did you come and find out?
Anyway, motion to adjourn? Jonathan, second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all.